and I currently employ 9 full-time property managers across 4 different states. I've negotiated more than $35 million in debt financing, small banks, big banks, angel investors, private money, seller financing. If there's been a way to get to the money through Section 8, I've been involved with it. I'm also involved on TikTok, on Instagram, on my Discord, over 1 million followers on there, blah, 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 vanity metric. But I really do enjoy teaching. We'll get more into that here in a second. What is Section 8, and is it for you? Is it a good investment vehicle for you? Section 8 at the very core is the federal government's response to helping low-income families, people at the poverty line or below. The U.S. government will pay up to 100% of their rent every single month, and they pay it directly to you as the investor, as the homeowner, and that's what we really want. This is great for new investors that want to build guaranteed passive income right off the jump, right at the first property, or for those experienced investors that may have gotten burnt with Airbnb or may have gotten burnt with a regular rental property during the pandemic, during any time of high unemployment, tenants lose their jobs, get furloughed, get laid off, whatever the reason, if you don't have guaranteed income from the federal government, are going to be making that payment out of pocket. Not a good time. So here's a quick case study. I worked with this guy, Jackson Speaks. He's out of Florida. He bought 142 rental properties with 0% down, $0 out of pocket, didn't need credit either. He did this using creative financing and seller financing. We found him a portfolio through working with real estate agents, also working with software, and finding a portfolio that they were willing to seller finance it. They allowed him to finance 95% of the portfolio. He's still 25 at the time. He wasn't able to come up with the other 5%, which is still hundreds of thousands of dollars. He was able to get a hard money lender to put up the other 5%. So he was able to get the whole portfolio with no money out of pocket at 100% financing. Just amazing. He currently manages these portfolios remotely. He's got a property management team out of state where he bought these portfolios, and he's able to just continue scaling. Now with the amount of cash flow that he's getting, it's even easier for him to do more and more deals. This is just a quick example right off the bat to explain how powerful creative financing mixed with seller financing can really be. So what can you expect from this webinar? I'm going to talk about the top 3 Section 8 secrets you probably didn't know. And if you knew about it, I'm going to go into a lot more depth and explain how you can take advantage of that. I'm going to have a live question and answer session at the end. And I'll have a promo, a discount coaching offer at the very end, along with a quick software demo so you guys can really understand how this works. So let's jump right into it, guys. So let me talk about how I got started with Section 8 or with real estate in general. I started with condos. After I bought my first condo, I rented it out. I quickly found out that dealing with neighbors, dealing with tenant disputes with the neighbors, dealing with high HOA fees and assessments and all these other unknowns that came with it, it's just not worth it. It was not something that I wanted to be a part of. And I quickly moved on to another strategy, which involved buying in non-HOA neighborhoods. I got into Airbnbs. This was all the hype back then. I was like, you know what? Let me go ahead and get a couple Airbnbs. The problem with Airbnbs are you have to buy them in nicer areas. They have to be furnished. They're going to be a lot more expensive, much higher down payment. And you have a lot of competition. You have service fees, you have cleaning fees, all these fees that a lot of guests are no longer wanting to pay. There's like a huge movement of people that are just like going back to hotels because Airbnbs have just gotten so ridiculous. So after I got involved with it and I saw how much wear and tear on the units, people moving in and out every single weekend, every single week, there's different people in the properties, neighbor complaints of constant traffic in the neighborhood. There's just endless amount of problems as it pertains to Airbnb, not scalable, not something I wanted to do next. Then I tried the BRRRR strategy. A lot of people are pushing the BRRRR strategy, explaining how it works.
Yes, sir.
You buy a property, you renovate it, you rent it out, you refinance it, and you repeat.
And repeat.
Incredibly terrible strategy. It takes forever. It takes you a month to buy the property, 4 months to renovate the property. By the way, you're spending tens of thousands of dollars renovating that property. On top of that, you have to go to the bank, take another month to refinance the property. Now you're 5 or 6 months in. And then, you have to put a tenant in there. You just spent tens of thousands of dollars renovating a property, and now you got to put a tenant in there as part of the strategy. And then you got to refinance it, pull all the equity out to do the shit all over again. It's for the birds. Don't do it. Non-scalable, very slow, very expensive, and it won't cash flow long term. So after I stopped with that foolishness, I tried fix and flips. HGTV said it was very easy to do, so I went and bought a couple properties. I funded all these deals with wholesaling real estate. I think I talked a lot about that in the past, how I wholesale properties,
There you
build
go.
cash flow using wholesaling.
You wholesale
and then try
first.
out these strategies. So that's probably, if you're confused as to how I even started, that's how I started and how I got my initial, 10 to 15,000 for the first unit. So with flipping properties, again, you can get a pretty big cash influx, obviously when you sell the property. But guess what? You have all the unknowns of buying the property, variable costs with contractors, subcontractors. You have to be involved in it. If you think that you can just go get a contractor, tell them to go flip a house for you, and you just sit back and wait to sell it, good luck, man. You're gonna lose all your money, and and on top of that, when you try to sell it, if the project never gets done remotely, close to budget, it's gonna be very difficult to profit. It just took forever. It's slow. I did able to get out of both of the properties. I did successfully flip them, made some money on them, but it's not something you can just go to Vegas for a week or go to Turks and Caicos for a weekend and just forget about. And that's not something I wanted to be involved in. So after several years of trying every strategy, I discovered the hard way. I had my aha moment, that light bulb moment they talk about. After working with Airbnb and all this other stuff, I was like, you know what? Screw it. Let me go ahead and just buy a $55,000 house, see what happens. Let me try to avoid all these idiots with all their misconceptions telling me, don't buy that house. It's going to be so many problems. You're going to have issues with the tenants, blah, blah, blah. At the end of the day, money talks, BS walks. And in this case,
Hey,
it was rented
Jeremy.
out for $1,350. $55,000 house rented for $1,350. It got me
Cash talks,
interested.
the bullshit
Tenants were
walks,
long
everyone.
term. The unit was in a little bit of rough shape, but didn't take that much to get it back to her former glory. And here we are. The day after I closed on this $55,000 property, the landlord calls me, says, hey, we need to switch you over so you can start receiving Section 8 payments. I was completely bamboozled. I had no idea it was a Section 8 house. They never disclosed that to me. And I honestly kind of freaked out because I'm sure you guys have heard of all the misconceptions that are going through your head right now is like, oh, this is why I'm not going to do Section 8. So I had those as well. These are just things that you pick up along the way through, the media, through friends, through maybe anecdotes that you've heard could not be further from the truth. And we're going to get right into that. So I'm sure you're all thinking like, this is great and all, but how do you get started? Listen, I was in the exact same position you guys were in 9 years ago, right? I had no clue where to start. I had no mentors. There was no like Section 8 classes or courses or community college courses that I could take. It was all sink or swim. So I did trial and error method. It cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars because, guys, I put in terrible tenants because I had no idea what I was doing. I had terrible property managers. I went through evictions. I chose bad properties that were not compliant with Section 8, lost money there. So in this webinar and the course and like basically anything I put out, it's all designed to help you avoid the stress and headache so you don't have to go through this exact same trial and error process. Because yes, it's smart to learn from your mistakes, but it's brilliant to learn from somebody else's mistakes. And that's what I hope you guys take away from this webinar today. So you probably haven't got started with real estate because you don't know how it works, common misconceptions, you don't have a coach or a guide, blah, blah, blah. These things are limiting beliefs that you won't even get to your first property. And it really is the second you get started, everything else falls into place. It's a copy and paste job into buying your second, third, fourth, fifth unit. So let's talk about how to get your first unit in the next 30 days. One, you have to understand that Section 8 pays way more rent than regular market rate tenants, non-Section 8 tenants. It's recession-proof, pandemic-proof, inflation-proof, market-proof, government shutdown-proof, debt ceiling-proof, as we've recently found out. All of these things are amazing as Section 8 will continue to make the payments through that. And why do they pay more than regular tenants? Section 8, let's say if a regular tenant was at $1,000 a month, Section 8 is going to be $1,300 or $1,400 per month every single time in almost every county. Why? They need to incentivize landlords and investors to accept Section 8 vouchers so tenants have a place to stay. Otherwise, they run into massive homelessness issues. They run into massive issues with people in waiting lists and not being able to find housing. So they have to pay more. Vicious cycle, but it works well in your favor. World-class property management is the key to getting hundreds of thousands of dollars in monthly passive income. And you don't need strong credit, nor do you need to put 20% down every single time you buy a property. Had I done that, I would still be here at 30 units if I had done that. Save 20%, invest. Save 20%, buy another one. Save 20%. There's much faster ways of accumulating that wealth, and that's how I got to 600 plus units this fast. So, number one, as I mentioned before, federal government pays above market rent for low-income affordable housing. On top of that, Section 8 will also pay occasionally $500 to $1,000 for a new tenant upon move-in. Keep in mind, they are incentivized to have you rent the property to the federal government. They want that. The more that it happens, the less people are on that waiting list, the more they're able to utilize that budget that they already have for affordable housing. So, first step, you got to choose the best city. You got to choose the best market. This is probably one of my most commonly asked questions. Where do I buy a property? One, I look for average home prices. I look in the Midwest and the Southeast. I'm looking at areas that are not overinflated. No San Francisco, no Boston, no New York, no Miami, right?
Well, RIPU, Jeremy
I'm
and Ant.
making sure that the property values are low, and I'm looking at rents are high. Guys, all the rents for Section 8 are all published online. It's all publicly available data. You can
Are we
see
on
that
buying your
anytime.
neighbor's house when you got
You can
Section
see,
8?
okay, well, the rent is $1,400, and my potential mortgage on this property is $500. That's a $900
Detroit's literally
delta.
perfect for this, bro. I'm not even kidding.
That's where a Section 8 arbitrage, the difference between the two, comes into play. And this is how I was able to really exploit that as aggressively as I could. And once I realized that, oh shit, I can buy a property for $60,000 and rent it out for $1,400, it was a game over. Because regular tenants, any regular tenant that has a pulse is not going to move into a $60,000 property for $1,400. You might be lucky if they pay $700 on that unit. Section 8 does not care about the value of the property. They care about if it passes inspection, the bedroom count, also the location. Next, average condition of the property. I'm not buying in war zones. I'm not buying in terrible areas that are going to have high crime and tenants are going to move out every single month. I don't do that. I don't renovate. I don't remodel. I don't do anything. I get the unit ready for maybe basic cosmetic issues, some housekeeping, maybe some light painting and landscaping. But we're not remodeling. We're not flipping houses here. How to identify the best properties? Guys, I'm looking at this before location. I'm looking at population. Is the population going up or going down? Crime stats. Is it violent area? Is it, going to cause a lot of issues with tenants? What's the average growth? What's the median income here? You don't want to buy in areas where tenants are going to be unhappy. The biggest killer in any rental portfolio is turnover. When a tenant leaves, you have to get the property ready for the next tenant. Very, very crucial. Property size. I'm looking for properties that are not too big. Section 8 does not care about square footage. Very important to understand. If you go out and you buy a 3-bedroom at 3,000 square feet, and I go out and I buy another 3-bedroom at 900 square feet, we're going to get the same rents. The difference is when both those tenants move out, you're now turning over 3,000 square feet of house, and I'm turning over 900. Guess which one's going to be cheaper? Again, as I said, condition, making sure the property is a turnkey. You want to make sure that the tenant can move in. Maybe you put $1,000 or $2,000 in minor repairs, but that's all part of that. Financing. I talk a lot about creative financing, seller financing. If you want to use a traditional bank, that's an option as well. You're going to need a 620 or better credit score. Most people, you're going to need anywhere from $2,500 to $5,000 down. That's how much cash you need on your first down payment on a seller finance deal. There's no banks involved. There's no credit involved. There's no debt to income issues involved. There's no loan origination issues come through. You guys could have literally $3,000 in cash under your bed that you go throw into an account, checking account, and boom, you now have a down payment for a seller finance deal. So everybody here, or at least I would say most people here, is looking to achieve financial independence, and they think that Section 8 or real estate is the way for that, right? Granted, I found it through Section 8, and I'm teaching you step by step on how to do that as well. This is why I think Section 8 is really good in order to get that financial independence or financial freedom or whatever you want to call it. So when you get a property through a lender, either a hard money lender or a traditional lender or a commercial lender, whatever there is, they're going to be excited to see that you're going to have Section 8 tenants in there. It's easier to get the unit rented out or financed because the lender knows that your income is going to be guaranteed. Tenants stay in the property much longer. I've had tenants that have been with me for over 7 years, 6-7 years since I started buying my first Section 8 properties. It's passive in nature. Section 8 tenants do not want to talk to you any more than you want to talk to them. All it takes is one inspection once a year, and it takes 1 hour. That's it. Once you pass that inspection, the money train keeps on ticking. This works great for new beginning students. Basically, every single student that I have in the course and coaching, they have a full-time job or they're full-time students at a college or university. So it doesn't take much time, guys. And also doesn't take any manual labor. You can sit here chilling on your computer, go on Realtor.com or Zillow, find properties that would be a good match, reach out to the agent. I have all this scripted. I have all this explained in the course and coaching as well, how to do that step by step. If you're one of my advanced students or intermediate students, about 1 out of 5 students in my course already have 5+ rental units. And this is great if you want to diversify that portfolio and really be able to start scaling. Big misconceptions. One, Section 8 tenants are going to destroy your unit. No, they're not. If you screen the tenant properly and you make sure they don't have eviction history, criminal background history, bad credit, you make sure you go and check their current unit that they're living in now, the probability of them destroying your unit is so low. They don't want to lose money. They don't want to lose their voucher. Isn't it impossible to evict a Section 8 tenant? False. Fair housing laws make it just as difficult to evict a regular tenant than a Section 8 tenant. And if you're buying in landlord-friendly states, as you should, as I described in my course, then you don't have that issue. In North Carolina, for example, it takes 3 weeks and $150 to evict a bad tenant, no attorneys involved. My property managers do all the evictions in North Carolina for me. And half the time, they don't even get to the eviction stage. We do cash for dollars. Don't Section 8 tenants ignore your lease terms. Guys, think about it. If you got free rent for the rest of your life, would you breach the terms of your lease and risk losing that free money forever? Make no mistake about it. These tenants that are on Section 8 have it forever. There's no expiration date on their voucher. There's no expiration date on how long they can receive the rents. It's a long time. So if you ever have any issues with your tenant, it's simply a matter of reaching out to the housing counselor, housing authority. Hey, tenant XYZ hasn't complied with this part of the lease. We need to remove them. It's one phone call from them. Everything gets back on track. Secret number 2, you have to get your property management right. If your property management's not right, you're going to turn into a landlord. And the last thing you want to do is be a landlord. Being a landlord means you're managing the properties yourself. That is for the birds. You do not want to do that. You want a property manager involved, and they need to be following your policies and procedures that I also outlined much more in depth in the course and coaching program. Not all managers are built the same. You want someone that's going to take care of problems, be responsive to tenant needs, and be able to make you money every single month. How do Section 8 inspections work? Section 8 is looking for 3 things: sanitation, safety, and structural. They want to make sure utilities are on. They want to make sure the foundation, the floors, the wall, everything needs to be inhabitable. That's basically the name of the game. I have an entire checklist as well that I provide that helps you walk step by step, room by room. Guys, as long as you're not a slumlord, as long as you don't neglect your rentals, it's very easy to pass a Section 8 inspection. This is not some hardcore like Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac inspection where they come in and they get on the roof. I've never had an inspector get on the roof of one of my Section 8 properties ever. Hundreds of properties, multiple years, multiple states. No one ever gets on the roof. No one's crawling into a crawl space. They're looking to make sure the unit is livable. If you have 1 property up to 10 properties, property management company is probably your best bet. From that, after 10 properties, getting a like your own property manager is going to work really well because you'll be able to afford it. A key thing here is do not insist on buying your property in the local area that you live in just because you're there. If you live in San Francisco, there's not going to be any cash flowing Section 8 property. Give it up. It's not worth it. You can't evict the tenants because you're living in San Francisco or California. The price is going to be too expensive.
Give it up, Jeremy.
High enough. And if you ever need to evict them, good luck. They have all the rights in the world there. So you want to avoid areas like that. There is no harm in buying from an area outside of where you live. And it's very easy. You guys have Zoom. You guys have FaceTime. You guys have home inspectors. You have real estate agents. You have all these people that work on contingency, meaning they only get paid once the job is done. And 2, they're willing to do it. It's for very cheap. Screening. The entire success of your portfolio, I don't care if you choose the best property in the best market with the best property manager. If you don't screen your tenants, you're going to have a terrible time. And a lot of landlords and investors, this is where they shit the bed, unfortunately. They get it to the property, they want to, occupy, and then they rush it and they don't do their proper due diligence on the tenant. The tenant, turns out to be deadbeat. They stop paying their portion of the rent. They might, bring other people in, and it becomes a nightmare. We look at background checks. I even have my property managers go to their current house to see how they're living there. That's very indicative of how they're going to treat your house. I talk to previous landlords. I look at background checks. I look at eviction checks. These are all things that your property manager will do, and that's all part of the process in order to make sure that you have a good tenant in place. What happens if a tenant destroys my property? This happens almost never. I think people think this is like a daily occurrence. It's not. Guys, these people are living in the units. Why would they destroy their own property? If they do, and you did a terrible job of screening them, You always have their security deposit. You have first and last month's rent. You can file warranty and insurance claims. You can sue them. There's a million things that you can do for recourse, but the whole point is avoid this nightmare altogether, screen the tenants, and make sure you inspect the unit throughout the year. Do not set it and forget it. Have your property manager go out there. Even a quick drive-by will tell you a lot about what's happening inside the portfolio or the property. You do not need strong credit, nor do you need to put 20% down on every property. This is so key to understand. The biggest secret here, everyone thinks that you have to have all this money, all this credit, all these connections. Not true. As I said before, it would have taken me decades to get 600 plus units. If I was putting 20% down on every property, that's not feasible. So what did I do instead? I used creative financing. I used other people's money, OPM. I built partnerships. I networked at like high net worth individual events, Cars and Coffee, Real Estate Investor Association meetups, RIA, go look that up, REIA, go Google that, look for your local chapter in your area. I also went on LinkedIn. You might not know it, but you might have some people in your network already on LinkedIn that might see what you're doing with real estate and want to get involved. And more about creative financing. This is essentially where you do either use other people's money, as I just described with partners. This is where a partner would bring the cash to the table for you, and you might be managing property, or you might be involved with the financing, or you have some other involvement, or seller financing. This is what Jackson Speaks did at the beginning of this live that I was talking about. He's the one that went out and reached out to different homeowner or investors and was able to get them to provide seller financing terms. With seller financing, you're always putting less than 10% down. 5%, 10% is generally the range that I look for. So on a $70,000 property, you're probably putting $3,500 to $5,000 down pretty commonly. Scaling. So a big thing that I get asked a lot is, how was I able to scale to 600 plus units in less than 8 years? And this is exactly how I did it step by step. And obviously I go into a lot more in depth in the course and the coaching, and I'll get into that after this. But this is how I scale. That together. Let's say we bought 20 properties. I would increase the rent on the portfolio, and boom, I just added so much value to that portfolio simply by increasing the rents. Guys, I'm not remodeling, I'm not renovating, I'm not doing anything to these properties except occupying them with high value tenants. Very key, very important. From that point on, I would do what's called a cash out refinance. I would go to the bank, refinance the loan that I had with them, take the equity